You walk into a store and you assume you're entirely in charge of your decisions. Like you evaluate your needs, you look at a product, and you make a choice to buy it. It just feels completely autonomous.
Yeah, the illusion of total control is really comforting. I mean, we assume our wallets only open when we consciously and independently decide to open them.
But step into the world of consumer psychology and you realize that mental landscape is, well, it's completely engineered by someone else. So welcome to this deep dive. Today we are exploring the hidden machinery of why you buy things and exactly how you are sold to.
And we're pulling the curtain back using a remarkably prescient source.
Yeah, we have our hands on a manual from 1925 by Edward Strong Jr. It's titled The Psychology of Selling and Advertising. And despite being, a century old, this text acts the exact blueprint for modern consumer psychology.
It's wild to read. The invisible strings being pulled on you today, they were mapped out 100 years ago.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Strong starts by highlighting an eternal fundamental clash between the seller's mind and the buyer's mind.
Right? They operate on entirely different wavelengths. The seller wakes up thinking about their product, hitting their quota, just keeping their business afloat.
Right, survival mode.
Exactly. But the buyer wakes up thinking about their own daily problems and their own self-interest. To understand why bridging this gap dictates modern commerce, we really have to look at the historical shift that forced sellers to start caring about the buyer's mind in the first place.
So paint that picture for us. What actually changed in the market back then?
Well, from about 1750 to 1880, during the Industrial Revolution, we lived in what economists call a seller's market. All the focus was strictly on production because supply simply couldn't keep up with demand.
So if a factory could physically manufacture a good, a line of people was already waiting to buy it.
Yep. You didn't need to persuade anyone, you just needed to build it.
Meaning the product essentially sold itself.
Pretty much. But around 1880, we entered the commercial revolution. Production methodologies became so efficient that they caught up to and eventually surpassed demand.
Wow.
Suddenly, warehouses were overflowing with surplus goods, and we transitioned permanently into a buyer's market. The entire economic focus shifted from production to distribution.
So businesses had to figure out how to cut the costs of distribution through, highly efficient selling.
Exactly. Sellers couldn't just open their doors and wait for the cash register to ring. They had to learn how to actively manipulate the buyer's mind.
Man, that sounds like a brutal transition for the salespeople of the time. I mean, they had to step out of their own worldview and try to map out the buyer's internal world.
It forced a massive evolution in tactics. Strong outlines the shift from the old shotgun method to the new rifle method. The shotgun approach was primitive.
Like just spray and pray.
Essentially, yeah. A salesman would load up a pitch with every conceivable talking point. The factory specifications, the company history, the materials used, and they'd just fire it at the prospect, hoping one tiny detail would resonate.
Just overwhelming the buyer with raw data about how great the company is.
Right. But the rifle method requires intense precision. It means finding the one specific point that actually matters to the prospect's real life and aiming directly at that. Strong illustrates this with an incredible story about an icebox salesman working in Atlanta.
Let's dive into that one because it really crystallizes the problem. So this salesman is out in the sweltering Atlanta heat knocking on doors, and his numbers are just abysmal.
Because he is using what Strong calls factory knowledge.
Yeah, he's pitching the patented hinges, the R value of the insulation materials, the manufacturing process. He knows everything about how the box is made.
And the customers are completely indifferent. They just don't care. So his manager tries a different tactic.
Right. He doesn't send the salesman to another training seminar to learn more specs. Instead, he has one of these expensive modern ice boxes delivered to the salesman's own house as a gift.
And the salesman suddenly stops being a vendor and becomes a user.
He sees the relief it brings his family during a heat wave. He experiences the luxury of having ice-cold drinks available at any hour. He feels the actual tangible benefit of the product.
So when he goes back out on his sales route, he ditches the factory specifications entirely. He starts selling based on home knowledge.
Home knowledge. I like that.
He talks about the comfort, the convenience, the relief from the heat. He is finally sharing the buyer's perspective, and his sales numbers explode.
It makes me think of a chef who refuses to taste their own cooking. You can memorize the chemical reactions of baking, but if you want to convince a diner to order dessert, you have to describe the flavor and the texture. You have to eat it yourself.
That's a perfect analogy. You have to experience it.
But wait, let me push back a little here. If I invent a gadget and I genuinely believe it is the greatest piece of engineering in the world, shouldn't that passion be enough to win you over? Like, enthusiasm is contagious.
You might think the passion translates, but the psychology says otherwise.
Yeah.
Humans are fundamentally self-interested.
So they just don't care about my excitement.
Not at all. Buyers do not care about your company's boundless resources or how much you love your factory. They care about how your product solves a specific problem in their daily life.
Ah, I see.
If a seller is talking about their own passion or their own company, they are encountering maximum resistance from the buyer.
Okay, so the seller has to map out the buyer's internal world. If we want to understand how that works, we need to look at the exact psychological sequence of a decision. Like, how do you or I actually decide to purchase something?
Well, Strong breaks this down into what he calls the fundamental buying formula. It is a 5-step sequence: want, followed by commodity, then trade name, then purchase, and finally satisfaction.
Want, commodity, trade name, purchase, satisfaction. Okay, let's ground that in reality.
Yeah.
Strong uses this mundane but perfect example of a woman named Mrs. Carter doing her morning ordering.
Let's look at her thought process. She realizes tomorrow is wash day. That creates the initial want. She needs clean clothes.
Okay, makes sense.
To achieve that, she requires a commodity, which in this case is soap. But she doesn't just ask the grocer for generic soap.
Right, she chooses a specific trade name, Ivory Flakes.
Exactly. She executes the purchase, and because it successfully cleans her laundry without ruining the colors, she experiences satisfaction.
And if the satisfaction isn't there, the formula breaks. I remember the manual notes she used to buy Aunt Hannah's bread, but it was too crumbly to make good toast.
Right, that dissatisfaction caused her to abandon Aunt Hannah's and switch her trade name to Tip Top Bread to solve her problem.
And that switch introduces another layer to consumer psychology, how we protect the choices we've already made. Strong calls these defensive layers.
Yeah, defensive layers. Let's say a neighbor, Mrs. Mills, drops by and tells Mrs. Carter that Ivory soap is actually terrible at getting dirt out. Mrs. Carter's established buying habit is suddenly under attack.
She has to justify her choice.
Her brain deploys 2 specific defenses. The first is adequacy, which is pure logic. She might reason, if I run the washing cylinder for a full 20 minutes, Ivory gets the dirt out perfectly well.
Okay, so she rationalizes it.
Right. But the second, much stronger defense is pleasant feelings.
This is where nostalgia comes in. The manual mentions a door-to-door saleswoman trying to get Mrs. Carter to switch to Cochrane baking powder. But Mrs. Carter is fiercely loyal to Royal baking powder.
So the baking powder store, yes.
Yeah, and why is she loyal? Because she has these warm memories of being a little girl in her grandmother's kitchen, using the red Royal baking powder tin to cut out cookies. Those pleasant feelings act as an impenetrable shield against the competitor's logic.
It's incredibly hard to argue with nostalgia.
But I'm trying to picture doing this every time I go to the store. Do we really run through a complex 5-step checklist like weighing commodities, evaluating trade names, summoning childhood memories every single time we buy a pack of gum? That sounds exhausting.
We don't, and that is the utility of habit. Strong clarifies that for established routines, our brains take a shortcut. We skip the middle steps entirely.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, we jump straight from the want directly to the trade name. You feel the urge to choose something, you immediately grab a pack of Wrigley's. There is no deliberation.
We just run on autopilot.
The full, intense mental process,
Mm-hmm.
the evaluation, the defensive layers that only activates when you are establishing a brand new habit or when you are actively defending an old habit against a persistent competitor trying to disrupt your routine.
So since everything starts with that initial want, I guess the most skilled salespeople don't just sit around hoping a customer spontaneously desires their product. They manufacture that desire.
They engineer it from the ground up. Strong breaks a want down into 3 distinct phases. First, there's the positive aspect.
What's an example of that?
Well, if you are on a long hike, the positive aspect is the anticipation of eating a cold ice cream cone when you finally reach town.
The daydream phase.
Then there is the negative aspect. That is the present discomfort, focusing on how hot, tired, and sore your feet are in the moment.
Okay, and the third.
Finally, the third phase is the obstacle. This is recognizing the 5 miles of dusty, unpaved road still standing between you and the ice cream.
The manual has these incredible case studies showing how weaponizing that obstacle is the ultimate sales technique. Like, take Bowman, a salesman trying to sell a modern gasoline pump to a stubborn, old-school hardware merchant.
This merchant was a tough case.
Yeah.
Other salespeople tried to sell him on the positive want, telling him how much extra profit he could make selling gas.
But the merchant didn't care. He was perfectly content with his current income and had zero desire to constantly run out to the curb to pump gas for people.
So Bowman evaluates the situation and completely ignores the gas pump. He focuses on an obstacle. He asks the merchant how he built such a thriving hardware business in the first place.
And the merchant proudly explains that years ago, he built the biggest horse hitching rack in town. It drew massive crowds, and those crowds bought hardware.
Bowman seizes on that. He points out that people don't drive horses anymore, they drive cars. The obstacle to maintaining that precious community trade is the lack of a modern equivalent to the hitching rack.
It's a brilliant pivot. Bowman sells the gas pump not as a machine for dispensing fuel, but as a modern hitching rack. He presents it as the only way to overcome the obstacle of losing his beloved customer base.
He engineered the want by framing his product as the solution to an obstacle the merchant didn't even realize he had. And there's an even more intense example involving life insurance. A salesman named Bagley is pitching a wealthy dentist, Dr. Barnes.
Right, and Barnes is financially secure. His wife just inherited $35,000. So the standard negative pitch, your family will starve if you die, is completely useless.
Bagley has to uncover a positive want. He learns that Dr. Barnes is obsessed with his alma mater, Wesleyan College, and dreams of his young son going there to play sports and join a fraternity.
But just having that dream isn't enough to sell a policy. So Bagley introduces a massive, terrifying obstacle.
He brings up a mutual acquaintance, Dr. Keller, a healthy, successful physician who unexpectedly died of influenza. Keller's son is now stuck at the local high school, his college dreams ruined because the money dried up.
Ooh.
Bagley places that exact obstacle in front of Dr. Barnes. He asks, what happens if you die early? Who pays for Wesleyan then?
That is ruthless.
By introducing that devastating possibility, he forces Barnes to buy the life insurance, not for his own peace of mind, but purely to protect that deeply cherished positive want. Barnes buys the policy on the spot.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you think about it, this tactic is exactly like building a dam on a river. A vague longing or a distant dream is like a smoothly flowing river. It's peaceful, but it doesn't generate much power.
Right.
The moment you place an obstacle, a dam, right in the middle of that flow, the water backs up, the pressure builds. Suddenly, that quiet river is converted into a massive source of dynamic energy. These salespeople are dropping a dam in front of your dreams and then selling you the spillway.
That analogy captures the mechanism perfectly. And once we see how this pressure is manufactured in face-to-face interactions, we can scale it up. Advertisers use this exact same 5-step buying formula to manipulate behavior on a mass scale through print media and billboards.
Because an ad is just a salesman in print.
Exactly. Strong argues that many ads fail spectacularly because they emphasize the wrong part of the formula. He contrasts complete ads with incomplete ads.
So what's a complete ad look like?
A complete ad guides the reader through every single step. He highlights an ad for a nerve tonic called Sanogen. It starts by building the want, asking if you are exhausted or suffering from insomnia.
Okay, hooking the negative want.
Then it names the commodity, provides the trade name, gives logical reasons why it works, and explicitly instructs you to go purchase it at the druggist.
It holds your hand through the entire psychological journey. On the flip side, he critiques an incomplete ad from General Motors in the 1920s. This ad simply listed the names of the car brands they owned, right? Like Chevrolet, Oldsmobile, Oakland.
Yeah, it didn't explain why you might want a car or what benefits a car provides. It assumed the reader already had the want and the commodity figured out and just threw trade names at them.
While that strategy might build general brand awareness over time, it fails to create a new customer out of thin air.
Advertisers can also pool their resources to address this, which brings up cooperative advertising. Strong points to the Face Brick Association. Instead of competing brick manufacturers running separate ads for their specific companies, they funded a joint campaign.
They didn't push a trade name at all. They just linked a universal want, building a beautiful permanent home with the general commodity of brick rather than wood or stucco. They expanded the overall demand so everyone in the industry could benefit.
It's very smart. A rising tide lifts all boats.
Now, I want to look at one of the biggest mistakes Strong identifies, the attention trap. We've all seen ads that use wild imagery just to get you to look. Strong mentions a Prudential life insurance ad that featured a massive, dramatic illustration of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra.
That example is so revealing.
But wait, let me stop right there. Isn't the fundamental rule of advertising that all attention is good attention? Like, if I'm staring at a giant picture of Caesar, I haven't turned the page. The ad did its job, right?
Strong psychology heavily refutes that idea. Grabbing attention is useless, even harmful, if it arouses the wrong emotions. In that Prudential ad, the text itself describes Caesar as a profligate and a pirate crucifier.
Oh, wow.
It grabbed attention, but it aroused feelings of contempt. It completely failed to connect any logical adequacy or pleasant feelings to the actual commodity of life insurance.
There was another example, too, a copy machine called the Ditto. The ad spent paragraphs boasting about how amazing the Ditto company was, but neglected to explain what the machine actually did.
Right. If the attention an ad generates brings confusion, annoyance, or negative feelings, those emotions subconsciously attach themselves directly to the brand. Atmosphere is critical.
So if your ad makes people feel tricked, they won't just ignore your product. They will actively develop a distaste for your trade name. You have permanently damaged your own reputation with that buyer.
Precisely.
Okay, capturing attention isn't enough, and making the pitch isn't enough. If we look past the initial transaction, what is the actual end game here? What is the seller really trying to accomplish long-term?
The ultimate rule Strong lays down is that the true objective of selling is to make a customer, not merely a sale.
A customer, not a sale.
He writes, advertising sells the goods once. The goods must sell the goods thereafter. If a seller fails to colonize your habits, they don't have a sustainable business.
To demonstrate how rarely sellers actually grasp this, the manual details a fascinating experiment conducted in a massive Detroit department store. A speaker at a local dinner claimed that the main reason people don't buy things is simply that they are never invited to.
And the president of this prominent store took offense. He said that would never happen in his establishment.
So they put it to the test. A man and a woman were each given $200.
Their instructions were to wander this massive store for 3 full days examining merchandise. But there was a catch. They were only allowed to make a purchase if a clerk explicitly invited them to buy. If a clerk offered a generic greeting like, "Are you being waited on?" the shoppers were instructed to say, "I'm waiting for my spouse."
Imagine the tension. They're wandering around for 3 days with hundreds of dollars in an era when that was a small fortune.
And the result, after 3 days, they still had all $400. They didn't spend a single dime.
It's astounding. The clerks interacted with them hundreds of times, but every single clerk acted as a passive order taker. Not one attempted to arouse a want.
Not one said, "While you're waiting, let me show you the incredible durability of this new fabric."
They failed to make a customer because they never even initiated the buying formula. They were still acting like they were in a seller's market, just waiting for the buyer to do all the work.
Creating that customer is intricate work because our habits are incredibly specific. Strong introduces the occasion aspect of a habit. He maps out a hypothetical woman's soap buying routine.
She doesn't just buy a general category called soap.
Right. She buys Pear's soap exclusively to put in the guest bathroom. She buys Palmolive for her personal bath. She uses Ivory strictly for washing the dishes, and Lux only for laundering delicate lingerie.
Her habits are strictly compartmentalized. If the Ivory soap salesman wants to capture more of her budget, relying on her general affinity for Ivory isn't enough.
He has to actively hijack a new specific occasion aspect. He must convince her that Ivory is also the superior choice for the guest bathroom.
Exactly.
Human habits aren't a big filing cabinet where you toss all your brand loyalties into one drawer. They operate like an automatic telephone switchboard. You have to dial the exact sequence of numbers, the specific occasion, to get the specific response, which is the purchase.
If the seller doesn't dial the correct occasion, the habit just doesn't connect.
The psychological machinery is so precise. Every purchase you make is a specific response to a specific occasion, guarded by complex layers of logic and feeling.
It really makes you rethink your last trip to the store.
Definitely. Let's look at the ground we've covered. We started with the economic shift that forced sellers to care about the buyer's mind in the first place.
We outlined the psychological buying formula of wants and commodities.
We explored how master salespeople engineer those wants by dropping obstacles in front of our goals, and how advertisers attempt to colonize our specific habits to secure a lifelong customer.
And remember, these techniques aren't historical curiosities. These invisible strings are being pulled on you every single day, whether you are browsing online or walking down a grocery aisle.
Very true.
There is a section at the very end of Strong's manual, focused on job analysis, that leaves us with a highly provocative thought.
Oh, what did he find?
Well, we have this cultural myth of the universal perfect salesman. The charismatic genius who can sell ice to an Eskimo and charm anyone into buying anything.
Right, the natural-born closer.
But Strong looked at hard data from intelligence tests administered to salespeople in 1925, and the results shatter that myth completely.
The variance in those scores is staggering.
Everyday retail counter salespeople scored a median of 50 on these tests. Meanwhile, salespeople tasked with selling highly complex technical power plant equipment scored a median of 140.
Wow.
The takeaway is that there's absolutely no such thing as a general salesman. A sales team is just a peculiarly shaped whole designed by a corporation, and a specific salesperson is just a peg that fits it.
The next time you find yourself pulling out your credit card to buy something you didn't even know you wanted this morning, take a step back. Ask yourself, are you really being persuaded by a universally charming genius? Or are you just encountering a very specific peg, perfectly engineered by a corporation to fit the exact shape of your current psychological vulnerability? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll see you next time.